On a scale that runs from 0 to 100, one popular breakfast cereal scores a 42, and another one sitting on the very same grocery shelf just a few feet away scores an 83. That is more than 40 points apart, and it is the difference between a breakfast that keeps your blood sugar steady and one that spikes it almost like a slice of white bread. Now here's what I want you to sit with for a moment. That higher scoring cereal might be the exact one in your kitchen right now, the one you have been pouring every single morning believing it was a sensible choice. And once you are past 60, that one decision carries far more weight than it ever did in your younger years. Because the rise in your blood sugar after a meal is the part your body now struggles with the most. You will see it on your glucose meter within 90 minutes of finishing that bowl. And you will see it again in your HbA1c 3 months from now. That number, that score from 0 to 100, is measured in a clinical setting. And the surprising truth is that something can look perfectly healthy on the front of the box and still land on the wrong side of that scale. So today, I am going to walk you through the 5 best breakfast cereals for your blood sugar, and the 3 worst ones I would gently ask you to leave on the shelf. I will give you the actual scores and the brand names you can find at Walmart or Costco. Stay with me to the end because the very best choice on my list scores lower than most fruit. And the number 1 worst, the one I want to warn you about most, may be the cereal you switched to thinking you were finally doing the right thing. Before we go any further, I would love to know something. What was in your bowl this morning? Type the name of your cereal down in the comments, and we will come back to it by the end. And if it helps to think of me as that one doctor in the family you can always check in with, then go ahead and subscribe so we can keep having these conversations. Let me show you why this even happens. Why 2 cereals made from grain sitting side by side can affect your body in such completely different ways. Every cereal starts in the same place, a whole grain with its outer layers intact, its fiber wrapped tightly around the starch inside. In that natural state, your body has to work to break it down. It takes time. It trickles into your blood slowly, the way nature intended. But almost nothing on that breakfast aisle is still in its natural state. To turn a grain into a flake, a puff, or a little O shape, the factory has to push it through extreme heat and pressure. It gets extruded, puffed, rolled, and toasted. And that process does something most people never realize. It pre-cooks the starch. Think of it this way. The factory has already chewed your breakfast for you. By the time that grain reaches your bowl, the hard work of digestion is mostly done. Your body barely has to lift a finger, so the sugar floods in almost the moment you swallow. The more a grain has been processed, the faster that flood arrives, and the higher it scores on that scale. And here's the part that surprises even careful shoppers. It is not the sugar on the label that drives this. It is the processing. The International Tables of Glycemic Index, published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, laid this out plainly. Corn flakes and plain bran flakes with very little sugar between them landed at nearly the same high score, around 74. Meanwhile, products made from oats like muesli sat far lower, around 55. Same shelf, wildly different effect on your body. The label was never the whole story. Now, why does all of this matter so much more for you and me once we are past 60? Research in the journal Diabetes Care has shown something striking about how we age. Your fasting blood sugar, the number first thing in the morning, creeps up only slightly with each passing decade, maybe 1 or 2 points. But your blood sugar after a meal climbs much faster, somewhere around 6 to 9 points every decade. The reason is simple. As we get older, the body releases insulin more slowly, and the cells that should be cleaning up that sugar spike just do not respond the way they once did. So that surge after breakfast lingers longer than it would have in your 40s. The post-meal spike is precisely where an older body is most vulnerable, which means the cereal you choose at breakfast is not a small detail. It may be the single most important food decision of your day. So as I take you through this list, I am not ranking these cereals on their glycemic score alone. I am weighing 4 things together: how gently it treats your blood sugar, how much real fiber it still holds, what the clinical research actually shows, and whether you can realistically buy it and prepare it without turning your morning upside down. With all of that in mind, let me take you to the safer end of that scale, the 5 cereals I would be glad to see in your kitchen. The place I always start people is with oats. Not because they are exotic, but because they are familiar, affordable, and waiting in almost every grocery store you walk into. Number 1 on my list is plain rolled oats, the old-fashioned kind. They score somewhere in the low 50s, which puts them firmly in the gentle range for your blood sugar. They cook in about 5 minutes on the stove, and that is part of why I trust them so much. The only thing I will ask of you is this: buy them plain, not the flavored varieties, because those, as you will see later, are a completely different animal. Number 2 is steel-cut oats, sometimes called Irish oats. Same grain, but chopped into pieces rather than rolled flat. And because they hold on to more of their original structure, Your digestive enzymes have to work harder and slower to break them apart. That earns them an even lower score, often down around 42. They take longer to cook, closer to 20 or 30 minutes. But stay with me because I have a trick that gets around that. What makes oats so special comes down to a soluble fiber called beta-glucan. Picture it as a soft gel net that forms inside your gut. As your meal moves through, that net wraps around the sugar and the starch and releases them slowly, a little at a time instead of all at once. That is the whole secret. But here is the catch, and it matters enormously. That net only works when it stays intact. A large analysis published in the European Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that oat beta-glucan can lower the rise in blood sugar after a meal by around 23%. Yet the same research showed something I want you to remember. When that fiber gets broken down into smaller, lighter fragments, the kind of damage heavy processing causes, the benefit nearly vanishes. The net is torn, and it can no longer hold the sugar back. This is not a fringe opinion. The American Diabetes Association lists whole oats among its top recommended foods, and studies have found that eating them regularly can bring your HbA1c down by roughly 4 to 0.5%. To put that in perspective, that is in the same neighborhood as what some blood sugar medications achieve from a humble bowl of breakfast. About that cooking time I mentioned, if standing over a pot for half an hour is just not realistic on a busy morning, here is the trick. Soak your steel-cut oats overnight in the refrigerator. This softens them so they barely need cooking, and the cooling itself creates something called resistant starch. Research in the journal Frontiers in Nutrition suggests resistant starch can help soften both your after-meal and your fasting blood sugar. I will be straight with you. The long-term evidence in people who already have diabetes is still mixed, so I am not going to promise you miracles. But as a small free adjustment, it is well worth doing. One last word before we move on. Everything I have just told you about oats applies to plain oats. The instant you reach for those little flavored packets, the maple and brown sugar ones, you have changed the whole equation. We will come back to exactly why because it surprises almost everyone. Moving up the list, number 3 is one I am especially fond of because it does so much of the work for you. Natural muesli, the kind with no added sugar, scores in the high 40s to mid-50s, but the score alone does not capture why it belongs here. Open a bag of real muesli and you will find oats, yes, but also nuts and seeds mixed right in. So in a single bowl, you are getting beta-glucan from the oats, protein and healthy fat from the nuts, and extra fiber from the seeds. That combination is one of the most complete breakfasts I can point you to. A few brands you can actually find are Bob's Red Mill, Alpen No Added Sugar, and Familia Swiss Muesli, available at Walmart, Costco, or online. But I have to be very clear about one thing because this is where people get caught. Natural muesli and the sugary mueslis and granolas are not the same product. Many of the granolas dressed up to look wholesome are loaded with added sugar and glued together with honey or syrup. So turn the box over and read the line that says added sugar. If that number is high, you are not buying the food I am describing. You are buying dessert in disguise. Now, number 4 is the one I promised would surprise you. The dark horse of this whole list, barley. Cooked as a porridge or as barley flakes, it scores remarkably low, often somewhere around 25 to 30. That is lower than nearly every other grain on the shelf. And like oats, barley is rich in that same beta-glucan fiber, so it forms that protective gel and releases its energy slowly and steadily. You might be wondering if barley scores the lowest, why isn't it number 1? And that is a fair question. It comes back to how I told you I was ranking these. On the glycemic score, barley wins outright. But it is harder to find in American stores. It takes time to cook, and there simply is not as much direct clinical research on barley and diabetes as there is on oats or bran. So it earns a proud spot on the list, just not the very top. There is a bigger reason all 4 of these foods matter beyond what happens at a single breakfast. A meta-analysis published in the journal Nutrition Journal in 2024 found that eating around 50 grams of whole grains a day was linked to roughly a 24% lower risk of developing type 2 diabetes. That is a meaningful number. But let me give you the honest picture, the way I would want it given to me. When researchers ran the tighter controlled trials, the effect on HbA1c was more modest than that headline suggests. So I will never tell you that a good cereal is a cure. It is one strong piece of a much larger picture, and it works alongside everything else you do, not in place of it. Which brings me at last to the single best cereal on my list. The cereal that earns the top spot is one most people walk right past. It is not pretty. It does not come in a cheerful box with promises on the front. You will usually find it down on the bottom shelf. It is plain bran cereal, often sold as all bran, and it scores around 42. What sets it apart is the fiber. A single serving carries close to 10 grams, which is more than many people manage in an entire day. That dense wall of fiber is exactly what keeps its score so low, and it is why it sits at the front of my list. It is in nearly every supermarket. It costs very little, and there is nothing to cook. You simply pour it. And here is something worth holding on to because it matters for what comes next. When researchers wanted to test a low-scoring cereal against a high-scoring one, this is the very food they reached for. In a study published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, plain bran cereal was put head-to-head against cornflakes with the same amount of carbohydrate in each. Remember that comparison. We are about to come back to it. But before we cross over to the other side of that scale, do me a quick favor. Of these 5, is any one of them already in your kitchen? Type the name below. Now let me show you the other side of that 40-point gap, and I will warn you in advance. The number 1 cereal on this next list might be the very one you switch to, believing you are finally making the healthy choice. We are counting down now from bad to worst, and number 3 on this list of cereals to avoid is puffed rice, the kind that snaps and crackles, along with rice-based squares and any puffed rice cereal of that style. These score astonishingly high, often somewhere between 82 and 89. Refined rice with nearly all its fiber stripped away, then puffed up with air and heat into something your body absorbs almost instantly. On that 0 to 100 scale, this is about as fast as food gets. Number 2 is cornflakes, and this is where I want you to recall that head-to-head study I mentioned a moment ago. In that same research from the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, when cornflakes were compared against plain bran cereal with an identical amount of carbohydrate, the cornflakes drove blood sugar roughly 40% higher, 40% from the very same number of carbs. The reason is that the tough outer layer of the corn has been milled away, leaving behind a starch that digests with almost no resistance at all. And now we arrive at number 1, the cereal I most want to warn you about. And it is not the one you would expect because on paper it looks like a wise, even health-conscious choice. It is flavored instant oatmeal. Those single-serve packets in maple and brown sugar or apples and cinnamon. Let me tell you about a woman I will call Dorothy. She came in genuinely frustrated, set a box of those packets down in front of me and said, "I switched to the healthy ones, so why won't my numbers come down?" And I understood completely why she felt betrayed. She had started eating those packets every morning because her late husband used to make oatmeal for the two of them, and it brought a little of him back to her table. She had given up her sugary cereal months earlier, and yet her HbA1c had not moved an inch. Here is what Dorothy did not know, and what almost no one is told. It is still oatmeal, yes, but a clinical trial back in 2019 found that instant oatmeal raised blood sugar about as much as white bread, while steel-cut oats from the very same grain raised it around 28% less. The grain was milled so fine and processed so heavily that the protective fiber net we talked about was already shredded before she ever opened the packet. And then, on top of that, the sugar was added right in. The healthy halo was real in her mind. The blood sugar effect was anything but. Now, I want to be fair and careful here because I do not believe in scaring you. It would be easy to walk away thinking every processed cereal is the enemy, and that is simply not true. Research in diabetes care has shown that while heavily processed foods as a whole are linked to higher diabetes risk, when scientists looked specifically at breakfast cereals and whole grain breads, those particular foods came out neutral, and in some cases were tied to slightly lower risk. So this was never about the word processed on its own. It is about what is actually inside each box. The glycemic score, the fiber, the added sugar. That is also why I would gently raise an eyebrow at a couple of so-called healthy favorites. Cheerios, with that heart-healthy reputation, still scores around 74. And Raisin Bran sounds wholesome, but those sugar-coated raisins push it higher than people assume. So knowing which cereal to pour, that is half of the answer. The other half is how you build the bowl around it. And after 60, that second half matters more than you might think. Picking the right cereal gets you to the starting line. What you do next is what carries you across it. Because here is a gap most people fall into. You can choose a low-scoring cereal and still send your blood sugar climbing simply because of how you eat it. Start with what goes into the bowl alongside the cereal. Add a little protein and some healthy fat. A small handful of almonds or walnuts, a spoonful of nut butter, or a scoop of plain Greek yogurt on the side. This is not a minor tweak. In a study from Weill Cornell, published in Diabetes Care, people with type 2 diabetes who ate their protein and fat before their carbohydrate saw their blood sugar come in about 29% lower at the 30-minute mark and around 37% lower at 60 minutes. Same food, different order. And that word order is the next piece. Eat the nuts or the yogurt first, then the cereal. Doing it in that sequence prompts your gut to release hormones that slow everything down, so the sugar from the cereal arrives more gently instead of all at once. Then there is portion size, the detail almost everyone overlooks. A true serving is around 30 to 40 grams. but most of us pour by eye, and the bowl we fill is often 2 or 3 times that. Even my number one cereal, that brand at 42, will drive your blood sugar up if you eat triple the amount. So measure it out properly just once. See what 30 grams actually looks like in your own bowl. Then you will know for the rest of your life. Watch what you drink with it too. Reach for water or unsweetened milk. The breakfast that worries me most is the old familiar trio: a bowl of cereal, a glass of orange juice, and coffee with sugar stirred in. Put together, that is about the highest blood sugar load a morning can carry. And if you want something sweet in the bowl, use a few fresh berries rather than sugar-soaked dried fruit. One more thing, and it costs you nothing. After you eat, take a gentle 10 or 15-minute walk. Around the block, around the yard, it does not matter. Research in diabetes care found that a short walk after a meal noticeably improved blood sugar control across the entire day in older adults. Your muscles pull sugar out of your blood as you move, easing the work your body has to do. Let me leave you with one more person. I will call him Frank. He lived alone after losing his wife, ate his breakfast by himself most mornings, and he told me flatly, "I am not giving up my breakfast." And I told him I would never ask him to. We did not take anything away, we simply rebuilt the bowl. We switched him to plain bran, set a few almonds beside it for him to eat first, added a spoon of yogurt, and traded the orange juice for a tall glass of water. That was it. A few weeks later, those after-breakfast numbers that had worried him for so long had quietly settled down. He kept his breakfast. He just made it work for him instead of against him. And that brings us to what I most want you to carry away from today. So, let me bring this all together. It was never as simple as good cereal versus bad cereal. What truly matters is how much that grain was processed, which is what that score really measures. How much of its real fiber is still intact, and how you build the bowl around it. That is the whole picture. And every part of it sits in your hands. That 40-point gap, the distance between a 42 and an 83, is yours to cross. And you can begin tomorrow morning. Here is exactly how I would start. Tonight, go to your pantry and pick up the box you have been eating from. If it is cornflakes, a puffed rice cereal, or a flavored instant oatmeal, you now know it belongs on the high side of that scale. On your next trip to the store, make the swap. Reach for plain brand, steel cut, or rolled oats, or a no sugar added muesli, and leave those 3 worst offenders behind. Then rebuild the bowl itself. Measure out 30 to 40 grams, add a little protein or healthy fat like nuts or Greek yogurt. Eat that part first, pour water or unsweetened milk instead of juice, and take that short walk afterward. And if you want to truly understand your own body, test your blood sugar about 90 minutes after breakfast for a few mornings, and see how your current cereal treats you. Bring that number to your doctor and ask whether a lower-scoring breakfast might help your morning readings. That conversation matters, especially if you take insulin or a medication like a sulfonylurea, because a big change in your breakfast can shift your risk of going too low. So please, never adjust or stop any medication on your own. Talk it through with the doctor who knows your history. I would love to hear from you before you go. Which side of that scale does your morning cereal fall on now that you know? What surprised you the most? And which of the 5 good ones will you try first? Tell me in the comments. And if there is someone you care about who still starts every day with cornflakes or a packet of instant oatmeal believing it is the healthy choice, send them this video. It might be the small thing that changes their mornings. I am Dr. Sarah Jenkins, and more than anything, I want to see you healthy, steady on your feet, and enjoying these years to their fullest. Everything I have shared today is here to teach and to guide you, offered with real care, never as a replacement for the doctor walking this road with you. Take good care of yourself, be gentle with the changes, and stay well. If this helped you today, subscribe so I can keep sitting down with you like this, and I will see you in the next one.